What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show. I am your host, EJ Holland, and today I am going to be answering all of your questions on Michigan recruiting. But before I do, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos. And liking us helps us get other people in the chat box so we can have more Michigan discussion. So again, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're not a subscriber to the Wolverine.com, now is the time to do so. Michigan is coming off a flurry of commitments, still some big remaining targets left on the board as well. So come over, subscribe today, use that promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at the Wolverine.com. Get everything insider Michigan recruiting, the team, basketball recruiting, transfer portal, and so much more. And you can join our message board, which has thousands and thousands of unique individual users. All right, guys. So again, we will be answering the questions in the order in which they came. You are allotted 4 free questions, and anything after that, you have to submit a super chat. And if you want to skip the line, you can submit that super chat. Just click that little box with the $sign. That money goes directly to my travel budget so I can continue to see top Michigan commits and targets across the country. All right, let's go ahead and start off with Noah. And he says, with Calvin Russell off the board, is there another wide receiver target, or are we just sticking with 3? Not right now. Michigan is very happy with their trio of wide receiver commits. Obviously, Travis Johnson, had Calvin Russell really not popped up as this big name 5-star, I think a lot of people would be even more excited about Travis Johnson. Michigan really views him as that future number 1 wide receiver. And I think that he is the guy they view as the number 1 in this class. And then you have Zion Robinson, a guy who runs a sub 11 100 meter, checks a lot of boxes from a metric standpoint, super athletic, a ton of upside. And then you have Jalen Pyle, who's kind of that safety net underneath, short to intermediate, good route runner type of receiver that they've traditionally landed. So I think the initial plan was to take 3 and make room for Calvin Russell. So I don't see them adding another receiver unless it's a big fish that shows some interest that they make an NIL run with late. But as of right now, they're happy with the 3 they have. Customer service says Tyson Smith has been quiet lately. Okay, don't know why you're calling out another user, but I think he left a chat earlier. Any insights as to how the Russell recruitment went down? Last minute negotiations, Moa postponed his recruitment. Was it because of Michigan? Is CJ's back rack on? Okay, so let's break this down one by one. In terms of the Calvin Russell recruitment, I think there was a lot going on there. Obviously, he had an entire marketing agency. He had an NIL agent. And when I started to get suspicious was actually early in the week going into his decision, because I talked to him at OT7 and I did my best to gather information on Russell. And I felt like Syracuse was definitely the biggest threat in this recruitment. And I wrote that over at the Wolverine. And that's why I didn't make a prediction for Michigan, because I felt like it really could be Syracuse. And then he talks to the national team and doesn't list Syracuse in his top 4. And I'm like, all right, something kind of fishy is going on here. Could see like a Jair Hill-esque moment. For those of you that remember, Jair Hill left Michigan out of his top group and then committed to Michigan. His was a little more obvious, though, because, you look at Calvin Russell, he's a 5-star player. Syracuse, that's not a school that you're usually too worried about. But I think for this particular recruitment, I had mentioned going into the week as well that Syracuse had put together a big NIL package. He had a great personal relationship with the head coach, Fran Brown, who's a great recruiter. They gave him the opportunity to play basketball, as did Michigan. They landed a couple of his teammates from Miami Northwestern. And so, going into the week, I know more and more confidence was building behind the scenes for Michigan. And I think Russell himself gave Michigan reason to have some of that optimism. But I always felt like Syracuse could win this one out. And even the day of the decision, I had a lot of people contradict me. I mean, even Steve Wiltfong came on and posted an update that he spoke to a source that the gut feeling was Michigan. And then, you had, I guess we adopted Maize and Blue Review and they were saying Michigan. And, I kind of just was like, look, we don't know. He hasn't given an answer to anybody. And this isn't disrespect to the other sides or to Wiltfong or anybody or a call out to anybody. I just think in this era of recruiting, it's really difficult to cover 5-stars that have this much going on around them, where they're using media, they're using other schools for deals and marketing and things of that nature. And so we just have to be on BS alert all the time. And I think a good learning lesson earlier in the cycle was Brady Marchie's. If you remember, he was the Georgia commit who was supposed to flip to Michigan, but it turned out to be BS and he stuck with Georgia. And, that was always in the back of my mind with this recruitment too. I was like, this could turn out to be the same exact thing, which it basically kind of was. So I think moving forward, we as an industry should be, and even if they are giving a school really positive indications, until, we get absolute confirmation that we're, really certain that something's going to happen, I don't think that we should really try to paint this narrative that it is leaning one way, because we could end up with egg on our face and nobody wants that. So throughout the whole time, I just felt like there was something going on here, which there was. So that's kind of how, my take on it. In terms of last minute negotiations, in terms of Salesi Moa, did he postpone his commitment because of Michigan? Honestly, I'm not sure. I can tell you that Michigan is still in it. I do expect Salesi to make a decision at some point in the next few weeks. He when I talked to him recently, he told me that he was looking at mid-July. I know he had locked in a commitment date for this past weekend and didn't end up saying it, or didn't end up announcing it. But I don't know. I really don't know if it's because of Michigan or Tennessee. I think Utah probably has the lead in that recruitment. But I also think he just wants to weigh his options and then make sure he's making the right decision. And like I said, his initial timeline was actually mid-July and not July 5th. So, we'll see. I think Michigan still has work to do. And then I have no idea what this last question is. Is CJ's back on? I think it might be a CJ Sadler question, but they're probably not going to go that route. Customer service. Oh, we have a super chat from Sean O'Hara, 199. So shout out to you. He says, how are you feeling about Savion Hiter? I'm still feeling the same way I've been feeling the last couple of weeks, which is this is a very tight recruitment with Tennessee. Hiter and his camp really wanted to keep things super quiet. Discussions are ongoing with both staffs. I can tell you they have not made a final decision. They have not informed staffs or anything. Savion, like he posted on social media, is looking to announce a date at some point here in the near future. I would expect it to be before the start of his senior season. So anytime from next week until, mid-August. But yeah, I think Michigan's done everything they possibly could in this recruitment. There's nothing else that they can really sell him on. I think Michigan and Tennessee are both going to be very competitive from an NIL perspective. I think they've both given him a lot of reasons to feel at home and feel like he can come in and be the guy in the backfield. So, it's just wait and see. I think even the staffs are kind of, in the same boat where they're just waiting and seeing, how things kind of progress over the next couple of weeks. Okay, let's go back to customer service. This is his last question. And he says, is there a world where we get both Deuce Gerald's and Ben Boulware? That D-line would be nasty, NFL ready. Are there any more VA or DMV kids you'll be evaluating soon? We need the EJ effect. Can't go wrong with it. I don't think that they would take both Deuce Gerald's and Ben Boulware. I think that Deuce Gerald's is the priority right now. And I think they're right up there with Oregon and Ole Miss. Now, if they miss on Deuce Gerald's, I do think that circling back to Ben Boulware is a possibility. It's not a guarantee, but that's something they could explore. But again, right now, I think the priority is on Deuce Gerald's. In terms of more Virginia or DMV kids, not right now for this cycle. 2027 has some really talented prospects, especially at the edge position. You have Anthony Sweeney, who's a top 100 kid at Good Counsel. You have James Pace, who's an on 300 kid at DeMatha. You have Ryan Jackson, who's another on 300 pass rusher at Annapolis. So, DMV producing pass rushers, just like every cycle. It's like pass rusher. I guess it's not pass rusher U because it's not a university, but it's the place to find pass rushers. Michelle Wallace says the Russell commitment was not right for the way he did everything. He was supposed to commit at 9 p.m. and didn't do it until 10 p.m. Come on, needs to grow up. Okay, no question there, just the anger towards Calvin Russell. Michelle Wallace says, what's next for the Wolverines on the recruiting? I'm assuming they meant recruiting. Anything you can think of that we can look forward to a commitment anytime soon or someone we can go after on the offensive side of the ball? The commitments coming soon are mostly defensive guys. So you have DQ Forkba, who's committing July 12th. You have Nick Abrams, who's committing July 16th. Salesi Moa will make a decision at some point here soon. Deuce Gerald will make a decision at some point here soon. Devon Benjamin is set for early August, but could move it up. So all of those guys are defensive guys, but those are still dates to keep an eye on. In terms of an offensive guy, I mean, obviously Savion Hiter is the big fish, and we still don't have an exact date for him. They're done at quarterback. They're pretty much done at receiver. They're done at tight end. Along the offensive line, they could, look for a senior riser or circle back to someone. But, that's pretty much it for offensive recruiting, man. It's all about Savion. Zachary Pizot says, with the NIL money lost from Calvin Russell, will we continue to pursue him or allocate that for other targets? I'm not sure if they'll continue to recruit him. I'm sure there are some bridges burned there. We'll see. It's a long cycle. A lot changes. As far as allocating for other targets, I think you have to look at NIL like this. There's rev share recruits, and then there is collective recruits. And what I mean by that is the majority of the class will be given NIL through rev share and others, sponsorship opportunities that Michigan already has partnerships with, businesses that Michigan already has partnerships with. So it'll be more true NIL. And then you have collective recruitment. And collective recruitment is where you can get a Larry Ellison involved to pay the high school recruit directly. And I don't think Michigan is doing that for a lot of recruits, only a handful of recruits. I think they would have done it for Calvin Russell. Obviously, that didn't work out. I think they're going to do it for Savion Hiter. We'll see if that works out. So I think it's a case-by-case basis if you're talking about a collective recruitment, because you have to pay the high school recruit before he enrolls. Once the high school recruit enrolls, they cannot be, paid without going through the clearinghouse. The collective can pay the high school recruit without going through the new clearinghouse if they do it right now, as long as the recruit is in a state that allows high school NIL, which, like for Savion Hiter, the state of Virginia does allow it. I don't know how they're going to handle collective recruitments. Is there another Larry Ellison type of recruitment aside from Savion Hiter? Is there another donor not named Larry Ellison that really wants Devon Benjamin or Nick Abrams? We'll see. That's a little bit more of a murky topic. Zachary Pizot says, what will the verdict be on Brian Jean Mary if we don't land any top 300 linebackers this cycle? Feels like he's well behind his colleagues on staff in recruiting despite us having a top defense year after year. Well, the verdict won't be great. There's a couple of things, though. One, Michigan usually does well at linebacker out of the transfer portal, and they've landed not just key contributors, but starters at linebacker, impact players at linebacker out of the portal. Michigan doesn't seem to be putting a big NIL premium on linebacker. And I think this is the cycle to probably do it if you're going to do it because it's such a need. But I don't think they're going all in. And I think that's put them a little bit more behind with Nick Abrams in a recruitment that they honestly should probably win. But if they don't land Nick Abrams and they just have Markel Dabney going into the fall, it'd be pretty disappointing. They could flip Caden Catchings from Liberty in the fall, but I think at that point, you're really going to have to bank on transfer portal again. Zachary Pizot says, top flip targets on the board. Is Turntine even possible? What position should we keep an eye on? Linebacker, like I mentioned, Caden Catchings, who's committed to Liberty. Obviously, that's not a super exciting flip from a rankings perspective or a school perspective, but he's one to keep an eye on. Safety, I mentioned James Dunnigan yesterday at the Wolverine. He's committed to Kansas. I wouldn't be surprised if they stay in contact with Jordan Deck. I think they'd be fine taking a late riser along the offensive line, but if the opportunity presents itself to try to flip a John Turntine, I think he would be the guy that could be Ty Haywood-esque. So I would still keep a bit of an eye on Turntine, but I think more flip targets will probably pop up in the fall as opposed to now or next month, because the entire month of July, the entire month of August, it's all a dead period. There's no more barbecue at the big house because all of July is a dead period. All of August is a dead period. So I don't even think schools can host recruits for that opening weekend if you open on whatever that is, August 31st. So yeah, we'll see in terms of flip targets. Zachary Pizot says, feels like Dorian Barney will be on flip watch similar to Brody. Any other recruits we need to probably work extra hard to keep? Not right now. I'm sure South Carolina is going to keep pushing for Julian Walker, especially with his father on staff, but they seem to have filled up with quite a few defensive line and pass rushers. So not completely sure there. In terms of other guys, I think for the most part, this class has been really locked in. I'm sure Carter Meadows will still get calls, but he committed to Michigan for a reason. I'm really not worried about Carter at all. So yeah, not anybody that I'm like, okay, this guy's probably one to really keep an eye on. It'd probably just be Barney. Lou said, looking ahead to the 27 class, Dakota Gorant should be a must-get for Michigan. Do you think he leads the way to recruit others to Team 148, and why is an education important after football, especially like U of M offers? I think Dakota would definitely be a big land for Michigan from both a talent perspective and a peer recruiting perspective. I think he's arguably the most talented prospect in a very loaded year in the state of Michigan in 2027, and landing him early could definitely attract more of those top in-state recruits to Michigan. I do think education and life after football will probably be important to Dakota. He is the cousin of Michigan defensive back Jacob Oden. He plays for former Michigan fullback Rod Oden at Harper Woods. He's been part of Sound Mind, Sound Body, so he's grown up around guys like Will Johnson and Bryce Underwood. So I think all that really helps Michigan. Michelle Wallace says, is there any flip targets we can land? We kind of touched on that. Also says the 27 class, there's a lot of Michigan guys that are going to commit. Do do you see us going after any one of them? I don't think anybody's really close to committing in the 27 class, but there are a lot of in-state guys to like, aside from just Dakota Grant. Obviously, you have Ricardo Kitchen, who, is a top 100 level guy out of Muskegon. Michigan's done a really good job with him early on. There are several, just guys in that 100 to 300 range in the state of Michigan. You have guys like Jameer Henry, who's a non-300 offensive lineman out of Detroit King. You have some really good sleepers as well. Also at King, I like Daryl Flemister, who's a really versatile athlete. I think he'd be a good take at nickel. You have Chad Willis at St. Mary's, who doesn't even have an on-3 ranking yet, but he's a big-bodied receiver who's really, really interesting. The state of Michigan will be, imperative for the Wolverines to really have success on the trail next cycle. This cycle, obviously, no in-state kids, so they had to build from the outside in. In 27, I think it'll be critical to build from the inside out. Tyson Smith says, are we getting Hiter? Like I said earlier, I think this is a very close race. I still think discussions are ongoing. I don't think Hiter's informed any staff of his decision or anything. They want to keep leaks to a minimum, and I think they're still, really thinking about their decision. Tyson Smith says, are we getting Salesi Moa? Like I said earlier, I do think that Michigan is still a contender in that race, but I think they have work to do. I think in order for Michigan to land Moa, they probably have to talk to him more about playing on the offensive side of the ball. He was pretty candid with me when I spoke to him here recently and told me that his preference is receiver, but he's strongly considering Michigan because he knows that if you play defense at Michigan, the NFL development is there. The chances to go to the league are there. So, I still think Michigan's in the mix here with work to do. Tyson Smith says, name a video game you didn't finish that you wish you would have. I just looked at my stack of games. Probably Earthbound. I started it and really liked it and just never had time to finish it. And I never played it as a kid, but I would recommend it just based on the first quarter that I did, but I'd definitely like to go back and play it. John A. Schultz says, how long until Neff puts you and Ethan out of business? I saw him starting his own website, man. I don't know. I guess we're going to have some tough competition there. John H. Schultz says, over under the number of flips committed players other teams flip, and over under the number of players Michigan flip. So I'm guessing he's saying over under the number of Michigan commits that flip out, which I would probably just set at 1. Like I said earlier, there isn't really anybody I'm too worried about except for maybe Barney, just because of the nature of his recruitment. In terms of the number of players Michigan flips in the fall, probably, there aren't a ton of spots left. I'd probably just set it at 2. John A. Schultz says, which players from this 2026 class do you think will receive significant playing time as true freshmen? Which are the most ready to contribute as true freshmen? Travis Johnson, for sure. I mean, Michigan obviously needs help in the wide receiver room. I said this last week, but I feel like Travis Johnson is a better wide receiver right now than Calvin Russell. He doesn't have the crazy ceiling that Russell did, but he's, very, very good. One of the best wide receivers in the country. 6'3", 180, so he can be that big-bodied guy on the outside, but he can also play inside. I mean, he's a very smooth operator. I've said this a million times. He runs routes like a small guy. He can sink his hips really well, really flexible, super athletic, great basketball player, led Oscar Smith on a deep run in the Virginia State basketball playoffs in one of the highest classifications, led Oscar Smith to a state championship on the football side. There's a lot to like about Travis Johnson. Great culture fit. So, I think Travis is definitely the guy that comes to mind. I think that Titan Davis is a guy who can get in the rotation along the defensive line fairly early in the process. I think a lot of people expect me to say Carter Meadows because he's the 5-star guy, but I think he'll probably need a year in the strength and conditioning program to really develop. Customer service says, which 2027 quarterbacks do we have the best chances with? Any 5-star generational talent? There is no true generational talent, but I think there are a lot of really good quarterbacks. I think a guy like Savion Bryant is the most exciting. He's out of Texas. He's a true dual threat quarterback. He visited Michigan, but will be a tough pull from the Lone Star State. I think they're in a really good spot for Keegan Croucher out of New England. He's a guy that checks a lot of boxes as a tall pocket passer, kind of shades of Brady Hart. Peter Bork out of New England as well as another one to really keep an eye on. He's already visited Michigan on multiple times. He was just at the passing academy. He's probably my favorite guy in this class in terms of having the upside and, having the safe floor as well. Teddy Gerard out of Georgia is a guy that really impressed the staff at their passing academy. He's been on the rise in the rankings. And then Elijah Haven out of Louisiana, super highly ranked. I don't really agree with the 5-star ranking, but he does have a lot of upside as well. And I was more impressed with him than I thought I was going to be when I saw him at Future 50 this past, a couple weeks ago. Mike Abner says, what commit are people sleeping on the most? What commit are people sleeping on the most? Probably my guy, Markel Dabney, man. Everyone's hating on Markel Dabney's delays, and he's ranked in the 800s. And look, Markel Dabney, man, like he was a priority on Michigan's recruiting board, like throughout the offseason. And I put out a great behind-the-scenes story on his recruitment that you should go read over at thewolverine.com. But I think evaluating linebackers is generally not fun. It's kind of a tough position to evaluate. And I think the success rate on evaluation hits is all over the place. When I evaluate linebackers, usually I'm just looking for a few things. Is this guy well filled out in both of his halves? Can he run sideline to sideline? Is he comfortable in pass coverage? And Markel Dabney is all of that. He's listed at 6'1", 210 on his profile. He actually came in at 6'1", 219 on his Michigan official visits. And I saw him here recently at a training session, and he's definitely well filled out in both halves. He can run sideline to sideline, and he's comfortable in space. And he's a great athlete. You don't see linebackers playing wide receiver and having more than 1,000 yards receiving very often. Markel Dabney had more than 1,000 yards receiving last year, which is super impressive. He's actually going to play some running back this year, so excited to see that. But Markel even had some interest as a kind of a star position player, which he was originally committed to SMU, and they kind of run, or at least they did. I'm an SMU alum, so I should know this, but I really don't watch a lot of their games. But I know they at one point were running more of a standard 4-2-5, and so they liked him as that linebacker safety hybrid. And that's where they kind of saw him. Again, I think Markel checks that box as a guy who has safety experience and is comfortable in pass coverage, and he can run. So I think when you're looking at upside, Markel Dabney definitely has it. When you're looking at, things that usually equates to a linebacker being successful at the next level, I think Markel has that. Jonah says, if you had to guess, where do you think Hiter lands? It could be either school, to be completely honest. I mean, I do think Michigan can win out in this recruitment. If you forced me to pick a school, I'd probably go with Michigan. But it's so close, man. It's really a toss-up. Andrew Malek says, oh, sorry, we have a super chat. Michelle Wallace. Not out of Ranger. It's college fans. Not really sure what you're saying there, Michelle, but appreciate the super chat. But if you want to rewrite your statement, we can certainly show it. Andrew Malek says, are rumors true that Michigan fully expected to land Russell? Do they pivot to another target or keep pushing for him? Like I said earlier, I think Russell gave indications that he was going to Michigan. I think he gave those around Michigan reason to believe that he was going to Michigan. At the same time, I don't know, man. Like I said, I saw BS like the whole week, man. That's why I never really got into saying that I was super confident. Like, I think this is just an era where you're going to have things like that happen. And we saw that earlier, like I said, with Brady Marchese, who committed to Georgia and was supposed to flip. And it was just a negotiation tactic, and he ended up sticking with Georgia. So, the point is he didn't pick Michigan. And some bridges were probably burned. And do they continue to recruit him? Probably not right now. It's a long cycle. We'll see. John A. Schultz says, was the Dorian Barney shed a top 3 all-time commitment moment in your career? Yes. And what made it even, I don't want to say I wasn't looking forward to Dorian Barney's commitment. Anytime Michigan gets a commitment, it's exciting. It's exciting for the site. We have everything ready. We're ready to publish. We're ready to blow up the commitment. So every commit is exciting no matter who it is. But I think with Dorian Barney, he was a guy that his recruitment was all over the place, but for the last 2 weeks, he was really trending to Michigan. So there was no real suspense around his recruitment, like there was with Calvin Russell, who was committing the day after, where you didn't really have all the predictions come in and things of that nature. So I think Barney just calling an audible and running away and having the camera on this shed was an all-time great moment that made that commitment even better and more exciting and more fun. And it was something that we could talk about and laugh about for days, whereas, if he would have just made his standard commitment in front of the camera and put on a Michigan cat, it would have just been whatever. It would have been just another commitment. But I think that he really made it a special commitment. And now I'm a big Dorian Barney fan. Like I want to buy a Dorian Barney jersey, because he's awesome. Who else would pull that off? And I like that it was completely unscripted, and that he told rivals he wanted to do the commitment with them. And they did 2 practice runs, and he just said, you know what, I'm not sticking to the script, I'm running off. And then what made it even better was the video came out later of his garage, which was fully decked out and super cool. And that would have been awesome if we would have seen it on the original live stream. But the fact that he just ran off and people were confused, and he pulled out a hat that apparently one Twitter user, I forgot your name, told me that the hat that he originally pulled out was not Penn State. It was actually Texas A&M. And then he ran to the garage, and he wasn't even wearing that hat at that point anymore. And then he ran to the garage, and obviously he had the setup, and he committed to Michigan. But it's definitely I wish I was there, but it's definitely one of my favorite commitment ceremonies. Definitely up there with some of the more dramatic ones that I've covered in the past. I can't think of another Michigan commitment ceremony that was this, wild. So it was definitely exciting. Let's go down to Jason Wilbur. Sorry I'm late. I'm hearing that Ohio is leading for Deuce Gerald. What are our chances with him currently? I think Ohio State has backed off a little bit. They're still in the mix, but it seems like Oregon is probably Michigan's biggest competition in the Deuce Gerald's race. He's been keeping things a little quiet. He did do an interview with our national analyst, Chad Simmons, earlier today. So, right now I would say Oregon is probably ahead of the pack. Let's go down to Selfmade Sean. I still think we can flip Calvin Russell, to be honest. Cuse ain't produced nobody. Jonas says, what is the total number of recruits that end up in the class? Probably like around 26 or so. Ryan Heibel says, what's going on with CJ Sadler? Why isn't Michigan grabbing kids from the state? This is a very, very weak year in the state of Michigan. And CJ Sadler has some moving parts, and it's probably not going to work out. But 27 is absolutely loaded, and that will be a focal point next cycle. David Ross says, we have a ton of defensive line already. Why are we going for Gerald? Because he's really good. And, defensive line is a position where Michigan rotates a bunch of players, and you need to have depth, especially in the Big Ten Conference. And, Gerald's would be a fantastic addition. So, they're not going after any defensive lineman. They're making room for Gerald. David Ross says, it's not a big concern if we lose Juice Geralds. Even if he is a 4-star, is he better than the recruits we already have? I mean, he's really, really good. Like I said, it's not a concern if you lose him because you already have a pretty big defensive line class, but he would be a great late addition. Or not late, but, after all the flurry of commits. Struggle Streaming with BK says, hey, EJ, what's the deal with Braden Rouse in Michigan? Anything? Hope to land him. Did he already – I started the live stream, and he was supposed to commit like at 7. And I don't know. Can you guys tell me if Braden Rouse already made a decision? Let's see. I'm currently searching. Looks like he committed to Tennessee. Yes, he already committed to Tennessee. So that was the favorite. Okay, I was looking on the other tab, but it already says it on his profile. So, yeah, I mean, Tennessee was considered the favorite for most of the cycles. So no real surprise there. I think he'll be a really tough flip. Dave in the D says, maybe Calvin Russell doesn't have the scholastic aptitude or inclination to come to Michigan. Everybody's angry at Calvin Russell, man. THS Last said they offered Devon the most money so far. Not really sure what that means. Jack says, any more offensive line targets? Do they want another tackle or interior because Markey projects as a tackle, or are they looking at just taking these 3? They would like to add another offensive lineman. I wouldn't completely rule out John Turntine. I think it's going to be super tough to get him from Texas, given the fact that they lost Felix Ojo to Texas Tech, so they had, some extra NIL power there. But I think with John, there are a lot of things that are appealing about Michigan, and maybe they do make a Ty Haywood-like late run with him. But I have been told that Michigan would be fine also taking a late riser in terms of, whether that's a guard or a tackle. I think they just have to see who really pops up in the fall. Struggle Streaming BK says, EJ, how are you planning to celebrate Bud Crawford's big victory over Canelo Alvarez in 6 weeks? LOL. I will be watching the fight, obviously, because I'm a boxing fan, but I am not excited about this fight. It's so stupid. I'm not a Bud Crawford fan. I hate Bud Crawford. Obviously, I was an Earl Spence guy, but Earl's washed now. And Canelo, I am not a Canelo fan at all. I'm a David Benavidez fan. Can we get Canelo Alvarez to fight David Benavidez, and can we get Bud Crawford to fight Boots Ennis? That's what I would really want. David Ross says, for what it's worth, it's tough to predict who pans out at linebacker, so not prioritizing shelling out big bucks for it might be smart. Yeah, Sean McGee has a plan, man, and he's sticking to it. We are way over time, man. I didn't even realize how deep we were. All right, before we get out of here and do some rapid fire for the remaining questions, we do have a message from our sponsor. Nobody teed me up, man. That's usually the sign that the show's coming to an end, is when people tee me up for our great sponsor, Andy Luedecke at myperfectfranchise.net. Are you a displaced corporate executive or wanting to put your career into your own hands? Or are you an experienced entrepreneur wanting to diversify? Andy Luedecke can help. Even if you are inexperienced, Andy Luedecke can help too. Andy is a huge college sports fan and franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses. Using his expertise, he helps others find their American dream through a very thorough consultation and evaluation process. Call Andy, put your life and career in your own hands. Best of all, his services are 100% free to use, so what do you have to lose? Andy is easily accessible. You can visit him at myperfectfranchise.net. You can call him at 404-973-9901, or you can email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net, and he will set up a Zoom call with you. And I mean, who doesn't want a great franchise? My wife just demanded that we go to Sonic the other day because she wanted to try some random thing called the Big Dill Meal. And if you are interested in owning a Sonic, you miss the nostalgia days of drive-ins. Andy Luedecke is your man. All right. David Ross says, people really overestimate how many players flip. I think because last cycle saw so many flips late, but this cycle, Michigan has really gone on a run where they filled out most of their class, and it's a little bit more of a traditional recruiting cycle. So that's why I'm setting the number probably over under probably at 2.5 maybe. Michelle Wallace did have this super chat that was kind of random, and came and corrected it and said it's not out of anger, it's just the college football fans, I guess, out of the Calvin Russell bashing. Struggle Streaming with BK says, have you had a chance to check out Chad Willis from Orchard Lake St. Mary's? Kid has some talent. What are your thoughts on him? I did see him at a 7-on-7 tournament in New Orleans. He was playing with Sound Mind, Sound Body, which obviously has a lot of talented kids, including my personal favorite in-state prospect, Donald Tabron, 2028 quarterback out of Cass Tech. Chad is a big-bodied outside receiver. He high points the ball well. He uses his physicality to win. He's only listed at 6'2", 185, but he looks like he's over 200 pounds already. Like, he has a really thick upper and lower half. He's not ranked. I think he's a 4-star caliber player. The thing I would really like to see with Chad would be some verified times, verified track time, a verified 40 time, any type of speed metric would be great to have on him. That's my biggest question mark. Wombat21 says, is Ballas the real Squatch? No, but he might be Neff's uncle. Andrew Younger says, are we pushing for Nick Abrams? Who are we battling for him if we are? Yeah, Michigan's still pushing, decisions still set to come on July 16th. Alabama, Georgia, Oregon are the other finalists. Nick did a recent interview with National where I don't think he was pulling a Calvin Russell and said Michigan was basically fourth. I think a lot of that has to do with Michigan and how they're handling NIL with Linebacker. But if they do decide to step up on the NIL side, or if somebody really wants to make a big run at Nick Abrams, like an outside source that goes through that collective type of recruitment as opposed to the rev share type, then, I think Michigan can pull it out. I really wouldn't rule out Michigan here. Like, Michigan checks a lot of boxes for Nick Abrams, but they have to get things right on the business side. Struggle Streaming with BK says, Canelo will never fight Benavidez. It would be a massacre. See you next time, EJ. You're the best. Yeah, probably not, which is sad. Corey G says, does Michigan have a chance with Abrams? I still think they have a chance. Like I said, they just have to get the business side right. And it looks like our final questions are from Wolverine Casual, who says, who is a wide receiver speedster who we could have realistically landed that you wish we would have pursued? Honestly, I would just take a flyer on Samson Gash. He ran like, I think it was a 10.5 100 meter, which is absolutely blazing. He's not the best wide receiver in the world, but he would bring plenty of speed to the room that's very much needed. He's a guy with a lot of upside. He has family connections to the program. Why not take a flyer? Odds with Devon Benjamin. Close call. I would still give Oregon the slight advantage, but Michigan's right there. Optimism has definitely grown, though. Wolverine Casual says, how many non-specialists do we land in the class total? 24 to 25, which would give them 26 to 27 total commits. Wolverine Casual says, biggest flip targets. Who are the flip threats in our class? We talked about it earlier. Someone asked the exact same question. In terms of flip targets, I think more will pop up, but I mentioned James Dunn again yesterday, who's committed to Kansas. I think they'll keep in contact with Jordan Deck. I think they'll keep in contact with John Turntine. I think you'll see more pop up in the fall. Caden Catchings, the linebacker who's committed to Liberty. In terms of flip outs, I think most of the commits are solid. And, Dorian Barney is one to keep an eye on just because his recruitment was so wild. But overall, seems like the class is pretty locked in. All right, guys, appreciate you guys for joining us tonight. As always, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos, and subscribe to the Wolverine.com. If you haven't subscribed today, use that promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at the Wolverine.com. Get everything exclusive Michigan recruiting over at the Wolverine.com. We'll see you guys next week.